Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for, well, it's one of those beautiful guitars, a Furch, a Furch, with the cheeky strap line. Life's too short to play a shitty guitar. And what's great to see is that all the feedback about these guitars online is very, very good. My impression of this one is pretty much faultless. It's come down from Iain, and Iain does want this small adjustment in the action if possible. So while it is pretty lovely as it stands, we're going to make that small adjustment. We're going to do it the only place we can do it, which is via the saddle, as you can see there. Now, having a look at the little manual, what do you call it, service manual, it says the previous, it was interesting to have this recorded because the previous measurements were recorded here, and it said it was 1.95 at the 12th fret and 2.6 high and low E respectively. So for my purposes, I've done a little map up there. You can see that I've got the recorded 1.95, 2.6, translate it into the last fret measurement that I tend to recognize. That's just my personal thing. Nobody else's. You recognize that, that's absolutely fine. But that's what it means to me. I know what you can get out of most acoustic guitars, and there's my little calculations of here's what it currently is and here's what an ideal target would be, which means, and then I've translated it into what to achieve that at the last fret, what you have to take off the saddle. Now people find that's really complicated because it's 1.4 along the there's 1.5 and there's 2, so 1.4, it's a bit less than 1.5. Anyway, it's a little bit approximate, but it suits me because I recognize the height of actions there. That's my little thing. So anyway, in my workings out, that tells me what I need to do. So to get the ideal action, it says, well, you'd want to take a millimeter off the saddle to lose 0.75 at the last fret, and you'd need to take 1.4 off the saddle on the low E to get down to 2.25, which is a complete millimeter lower. And then obviously I have to make a measurement of what's available at the saddle. There's 2 mils on the high E and 3.6 on the low E. So we'll only take 1.4 from that, which will be about half the thing, less than half the thing, and we'll take half from that, or just under. So that's my calculation. And then of course the thing, once you've done that thinking, you look at this and you say, can this withstand that? Can it hold that? Now I'm looking at the break angle here, going over the saddle, and it's about, hard to say exactly, but I'd say it's about 10 degrees on the high E, and obviously quite a bit more on the low E because it's taller. Oops, sorry, that's really bad camera work. I'm looking past my camera. So we're going to make the adjustment there. When I was researching the Furch guitars, apart from the fact they are, you know, as I say, singularly well respected, I was hoping that I'd find some sort of adjustability component, and what the Furch guitars have, and other techs and channels have covered it in quite some detail. They have a sleeve that encloses, or a kind of frame that encloses the truss rod, and it comes down. It's an aluminium support or carbon fiber. I can't remember which. But it comes down here and it stiffens up the whole heel business, which is great. And that's within these models, this is I don't know, about a £1,700 guitar, this one. When you get up to the £3,500 models, and I think in the future probably all the rest, or they'll be increasingly incorporated in all their range, they'll have the what do they call it, CNR Composite Neck Reinforcement system, which is this bit built into here. They will there's a version called CNR Active, which has two things of note which is a couple of bolts in there. One of them is a user adjustable bolt, which allows the user to alter the angle of the neck to do this work that I'm going to do now, which would be much more desirable to do it that way. And currently that's why tailors, for my money, are a good idea. But these guys, Furch, are going to be doing that more, and they have it on their top models. And the second component in that active system is they have what they've got is an expansion block of wood, and its purpose is to, without trying to figure out how to explain it, its purpose, it's intended to is to counteract any drying and neck changes throughout the season. So quite how it does that is anyone's guess, but it as the sort of what do you call it? That's the block inside there. It's not a sacrificial block; it's a sensor block of wood. As it shrinks, it changes the tilt of the neck, changes the action, and as it if it expands in more humid conditions, it does the other way around. Now, I'm not at all. I think if that works, and many people are completely convinced it does, and I'm not saying it doesn't. I've no experience of it. I would take their word for it unless reality proved otherwise, and I would not start from detracting from any idea that it would be anything other than what they say. But for £3.5 grand or something, you're entitled to question the evidence for that, and I'm not entirely sure. I haven't had enough look at it or talked to enough people to know whether that works the way it's absolutely intended. The only tiny little criticism I would have of this guitar is the very slight misplacement of the bridge in relation to the neck. And all that means is I would be looking for a bit more of a balance that way. But it's a tiny detail. There's not any desperate shortage of space here on the high E. And of course, you can't really do anything about it down here because the bridge is where it is. So that's the only criticism in the entire thing. Other than that, it's an absolutely beautiful thing. A great point that somebody pointed out: if you ever see one of these come into your workshop, be very careful if somebody asks you to put in one of these, because you might find yourself drilling into the metal of the Composite Neck Reinforcement unit. One of the things I don't know about at all in these, I'm just looking right up into this joint here. One of the things I don't know about, one of many things I don't know about this guitar, or many of these guitars, and I've seen, it's been a question I've had floating in my mind when I've looked at people doing neck resets. If you look at, for example, at this fingerboard extension, for all intents and purposes, that is sitting dead flush on the top of the guitar, and I've seen people do adjustments, but I've not really seen what they've done with this. I've never heard an adequate explanation of what happens to this part here. Now, in Taylor system, it pivots around the two shims, create a compensation, one for the other, so the whole thing does kind of lift this up at the end, so you get a little bit more shim and sticking out there, which is fine, but it's supported. I don't know with the active system, since I haven't seen it, I don't know what actually happens if you make an adjustment there, whether something comes up with it or whether it floats. Hopefully it tilts and is supported, but I can't see. What totally separate from Furch, which has nothing to do with them, I've watched people do mechanical old-fashioned neck resets, and I've watched them change this angle here and do nothing to that angle, and if the fingerboard extension is stuck onto the surface here, God knows what that does to the fingerboard. It must bend it round this point. Anyway, maybe it was a bad bit of filmmaking from that tech that day. Anyway, so this is going to be really straightforward, because in addition to this, I think Iain would prefer or be happy to keep these strings. They look like they're brand new, I've got some more replacements, which I went slightly lighter, because I seem to remember in our conversation Iain was saying he wouldn't mind if it was the same or lighter. But actually they're so new that I don't really think we're going to need to do much. Well, I don't think it will put them through much stress. So, pardon me, what I would suggest we'll do is, I've done the measurements, I've done the checks. I'm not a very good player of any kind, but it's a lovely sounding thing. Sweet, sounds great. Yeah, so really it's going to be pretty straightforward and quick. What I've noticed is, as far as I can see, the nut is pretty much spot on. It's a tad higher than I would have it, the slots, but if we make a reduction here, then that's not a bad thing really, because I think we're going to come slightly down anyway, so it'll be possibly closer to where I would go for it. I don't hear any tuning issues. I don't hear anything grabbing. So I think it's not only is it good to leave that nut in place, it's beautifully fitted. I think we can also probably get away without doing anything to it. Sometimes it's good to just run the nut files just gently through it, only for the purposes of widening, if nothing else, because the last thing, or the only thing you don't want is that gripping situation. But it looks in really good condition. Everything's excellent, and a really nice fitted case as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slack off all of these strings. Yeah, I mean a really top-notch guitar. What was interesting for me was when I made a post about this guitar and the whole business of, or just questioning the business of the adjustability and adjustability in the neck. That's interesting. That's not just touched down with a tiny bit of glue. I'll put a tiny bit in, stop it from moving. Yeah, so the sort of observations about the Furch CNR system, which, you know, for me, I posted about from a genuine position of interest, and anybody who watches these old videos will know that I'm so generally depressed actually by the state of most acoustic guitars. And there's this constant running, I don't know what you'd call it, it's not an argument exactly, it's a sort of point of debate about whether the rising action in acoustic guitars is caused by villain number one, moisture or humidity is usually attributed to be the first and primary cause, and some manufacturers absolutely go a ton on that, more than others, or whether it's perhaps more to do with forces pulling on a less than robust structure, you might say. So what am I doing? Okay, can you see me? I'm going to mark up my adjustments on here. Yeah, so the argument sort of goes in two ways. Like I say, some people insist it's all about humidity, and that's the principal cause of rising playing action, and others insist that it's all about I have a kind of experience and sneaky feeling that it's seems to me to be more about forces of string loading pulling on very light tops, guitar tops, lightly constructed, and therefore not hugely robust and not necessarily able to counter or withstand the forces put on it by the strings. So if you're like me and you kind of think you err a lot on the side of the forces of the strings, then you kind of a lot of guitars seem to be destined, regardless of the humidity conditions, seem to be destined to deform over time with their playing actions rising due to the loading of the strings pulling up at the well, actually rotating the neck. It's much more like that than it is pulling up the bridge, which is what some people, I mean, the bridge does belly, and it certainly is, I think it probably is where the loading of the strings also does kind of express itself. This is very hard to hold in place with only one of these. What have I got? Have I got another one floating around here I can use to prop me up? Prop me up. I think I have. It's much thinner. That's not good. Yeah, so it might just do me. Yeah, so for my take on it, I think the most damage is done by string loading and the way the string loading pulls up. Mixture of pulling up the bridge towards, pulling the bridge towards the neck. Sorry, towards the body. Pulling the bridge towards the headstock, if you think about it. And at the same time as that happens, I need to hold this down. My hands are, I need some sort of grippy piece of thing. Yeah, so it pulls the headstock up into the air, trying to make its way to the back end of the guitar, if you like. And the other issue is that it pulls the bridge up slightly as well. Okay, that's all right. That's my mark. So they're about 1 and 1.4. Did I say 1 and 1.4? Actually, I went a bit under, didn't I? Just check that. Okay, so these aren't. Yeah, I went a tiny bit under. Just being nervous or conservative. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm not convinced that when your action rises on your guitar, that the answer to it is spend money on dehumidification products, etc., etc. There are some situations where I'm sure that is a good thing to do, but my suspicion falls on the permanent loading, which, you know, to put a crappy simple drawing, it seems to me that your box structure, when you have the neck like so and the bridge on top of there, you get this pulling up that way, which creates that little bit, sometimes creates a little bit of a hump there, and as this tries to rotate up that way, this gets deflected down into the sound hole, causing a kind of curve on top of the thing. So and then as a result of those two things, the action then, if the neck goes like that extreme, then your action suddenly becomes higher. But it's got very little to do with humidity. Okay, so what I'm going to do to keep track of my adjustments is I'm going to measure at the points, and I'm going to make sure I reduce by as much as I want. The line is only a guidance, so measured at the low E I've got 8.29, so let's call it 8.3 there. I know I'm going to take off 1.4, So my target will be 6.9, 7.9, 8.3, yeah. Target 6.9, its lowest at that same point measured at the low E. And then at the high E, where is it sitting? There it is. It's quite hard to see, feel. High E at 670. And taking away one max, but I'm calling it 0.9 to be safe. That would be 570, 580. Is that right? 580 plus 0.9, 680 minus 10.10, 670. Yep, so 580 is the target on the top part. So that is my those are my calculations, and for fun of this I get me up the good old-fashioned, soon to be refreshed sanding block of doom. So this is again my old handy block and my old handy technique. So I see what I'm doing, I look at what I'm doing. I want a square cut, and I'm going to take more off the base side, so a little bit more off the base side. So I'm going to start by putting down a bit of uneven action. This feels like new bone, very similar to new bone. Okay, we're pretty much there. Actually, it's evened out quite nicely. Oh no, we're not there. I'm looking at the. We're not there. We've evened out just about. Now I've got little sort of sanding spinny things, but I'm much happier to have my hands on this and do this by hand. And the reason why is it's so important to get it right that I find it's a very touchy-feely thing, and I don't want to leave it to a machine to take away a ton of stuff all of a sudden that I wasn't expecting. So we're nearly onto a straight line, having put more weight down on the low E or the base side to begin with. So as I say, I'm using the visual line purely as a guide, but I'm going to take my cue from the measurements that I've made. Now, what happens if you need to lower and you haven't got, or it's marginal, you haven't got the break angle over the high E string that you need, you can notch, very slightly slot, I should say, the high E peg hole. It wouldn't want to do it on this guitar. It's too nice, but you know, depending on what the action demands, and in this case it's not so bad or in any way very unplayable or anything like that. This is, we're making a sort of a tweak for preference. I'm just evening this out now to where my measurements suggest. Still quite a way off. It's slower than you'd think. You can see my gap, but what I can do is, as always, I can check my measurements. So on the low E we've got 714, so we're above our 690 still, so we haven't got there yet. And then on the high E we've got 607, so we're 20 off. Yeah, so we're still a little way off, which is nice. Now, if we wanted to, we could just replace at this point in time and have a to test feel, and if it's good and everything's okay, we can call it as close as we want. So look, right angle's good. Just do a little bit of lean. Okay, so there's my mostly reduced, and it's close but it's not pushing the level. So we were on the treble side, we were looking for 580, and we've got at 586. We're on where we wanted, that's good. And on the bass side we were 690, and we got 692, so we're actually spot on. So there's my targets based on the numbers that I started out with. Of course, if you get to there and you don't like it, of course you can always put another saddle in, or shim that saddle. In this case, it's you can shim with new bone or tusk or bone even. But my calculations should be good as predicted, and so I think I've done it with precious little stress on the strings or anything like that. So I checked the neck relief, and on these strings it was practically zero, none whatsoever. So it played fine, and my cue is that if it plays fine with zero relief, then you don't actually need to mess with it and change it. You know, if it's not broke, don't fix it type of angle. So in this case, it seemed absolutely fine. But I guess what it means is I know that there is a tiny bit of room for making, adding in a little bit of relief, should we feel it needs it after lowering the action, which is sometimes what you might find. Wow, hello glue, holy cow, that is really tight. Why is it doing that? Comes up. I find it, unless you've got a shed, a fridge or something in your workshop, this stuff is just nigh on impossible to use. So what I'm going to do, it's already thickened up this to a point where it's soon going to be unusable. I'm putting just a little bit of glue on the front edge there, and I'm going to get my fingers in there and just place it down and feel my way. I can get this string out of the way. That's good. Yeah. I don't know if you can't see that, can you? Sorry, silly me. Right, try and close this pot up a bit. It looks like it could be that this has already had its day, this one, because it's going to stick together and air's got into it already. Okay, so very little needing doing with this actually, and we're really just making this tiny adjustment and possibly running the we'll see. We're not going to do it if it doesn't need it. That's the principle. Now I'm just tightening up the G and the D first, Furch, so that basically they keep the nut pinned down and don't pull at it sideways, which I'm sure it won't make it go anywhere, but just in case, you don't want it to. I've always thought that the acoustic guitar is pretty unforgiving when it comes to, well, it is unforgiving when it comes to moving it, side to side movement, and if it's not perfectly on the mark, from the outset. You have to live with wherever the bridge falls in relation to the neck. And it's not bad, it's about, I would say it's about 1 millimetre off all told where I'd like it to be. Now I think I'm going to have to use a, oh, I've got my tuning fork. A little bit of stretching. These should have been all stretched out anyway, but so what I'm going to be listening for as I tune up now is the movement of the strings through the nut slots. That's really critical. Do we get any pings? Nope. Well, let's have a look at what we have now. Last fret, we aimed for 2.25 and we got it. Hey. And here we aim for 1.75 and we got it. We're spot on. Well. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to Iain asked me to look at the frets here. He felt one of them was a little bit, or some of them were a little bit sharp, and they may just be on the edges here, the third one. So they probably could do with a very, very small tweak using the safe edged file, and that means a very, very light roll around. Amazing how easy it is that things get, or how tiny the amount of sharp edges need to be for you to feel them. Everything's good on this angle or from this aspect, although I guess what isn't the frets have a little bit of lift right at the end, but that's okay. They're pretty good, but that one did have a bit of a sharp edge. So it's just as simple as that, taking care of these just these little knife edges on the edge of the bevel. It's a tricky thing, because when you bevel with a machine or a block, I should say, you get a very clean junction between the face of the beveled fret and the length of the beveled fret, and when you reach that junction, it's a knife edge basically, if you've done it with a block. And so it can be the tiniest amount, but incredibly sharp. You can see I'm just very lightly rolling this fret file around these edge corners, the end corners right at the edge, just to make sure I'm taking away any little burrs. Eventually, of course, to get rid of them all, if you can find that you round off a little bit of the sort of clean look of the fret, because, you know, on the one hand, when it's machine precise, it feels wonderful, but on the other hand, it can have those sharp edges. So if you round it off, it feels better, but you lose a little bit of the precision look. But I think it always comes down to what your priority is, and if you feel it, you have to make that little adjustment. So that is about all I'm going to be doing for this. It's a very straightforward once over. I'm happy that the flat neck is playing fine with the action we've got, and it's usually the case with acoustic guitars anyway. Even though they get hit harder, the action is quite a bit higher than it is for an electric guitar, so you can tolerate a flatter neck or a lower action without needing to level the frets. As you can see here, I've not had to do any fret leveling to make that action change play okay, which is good. But that's typical of acoustic guitars in my experience. You can make that change without needing to fret level them. Oh yeah. fine by me. Okay, I shall call it a day there. I've been routing all the rest of this evening, making a custom build, a mini Strat for Nick in the States. So Nick is at home, I've been hand carving that, and then I've been routing this to begin with. It's a thinner body, older, thinner body, but it's going to have normal carves and curves on it, but it's just going to be smaller. Yeah, ready to go. Okay, well, thank you for watching. Short one, nothing to report. I will, I'm going to ask whether Iain wants me to record in here. This is, I'm not a Furch thingamajig approved person, so I'll check, but if he wants me to write an observation in, I will take a still picture of this from the thingies, and I can write in what the actions are that we've got for this, and there we go, snapshot. We're good to go. Thanks for watching. See you again soon for something more demanding, probably.